Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 8th of January 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today in the studio, Patrick Henningson from 21st Century Wire. Thanks for joining us, Pat.
Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year to you as well. Your first UK Column News of the new year.
That's right.
You're back in the studio, and MPs are back in Parliament because school holidays are over for them, and they're back. And what have we got? Well, first of all, a cabinet reshuffle. This is really exciting stuff. Not much has happened so far. The Northern Ireland Secretary, James Brokenshire, has resigned, and also the Conservative Party Chairman, McLaughlin, has resigned, Sir Patrick McLaughlin, and well, there's some speculation that perhaps Chris Grayling could get that job, but really not too much has happened on this front so far. However, Theresa May, perhaps not going to be too happy this year because, well, before we get on to why, we'll just mention the fact that Patrick, as you know, I've been saying for quite some time that when we look at Brexit, that we need to look at David Cameron and his tour of Europe and the Best of Both Worlds document. And today we have the news that another EU institution that we want to opt into, we're dying to opt into. This time it's medicines. Monsieur Barnier saying, no, you can't sort of pick and choose which parts of the single market you want to be part of. It's going to be all or nothing sort of thing. But nonetheless, Britain aiming to choose which institutions it joins. So they want to remain under supervision of the EU with regard to medicines. This is according to what are being described in the press as leading government figures, and they were speaking to the Financial Times, which is why I put the FT article up there. So yet another on top of Europol, aviation, and a few others that have been mentioned over the months. Yet another one that we want to opt into.
That's good. So this exiting the EU is going swimmingly well.
It's going swimmingly well. Well, it doesn't end there, because of course a big part of exiting the EU, if we're going to exit without the exit, Brexit without the exit, is trade. And there are two trade bills being discussed this week in Parliament. The first is being discussed today, the second reading of the Taxation Brackets Cross-Border Trade Bill 2017 to 19. And this is where Theresa May is perhaps facing another defeat in Parliament, because this is a bill which, amongst other things, I mean, you were talking to me about this morning, amongst other things, changes the rules for VAT. And companies that are doing business with the European Union may have to pay VAT up front for any imports that they bring in. That is part of the parliamentary advice on this. But nonetheless, what is really interesting about this, and also the trade bill, which is also going to be discussed later in the week, is that the government is attempting to sort of give itself more of these so-called Henry VIII powers. They're attempting to sideline parliamentary decisions on much of the legislation that's being pushed through here, and many people asking why that is. So the question is all the noise over a reshuffle designed to sort of mask this attempt to push through further draconian Henry VIII powers here? It's the Brexit situation as we've moved into 2018 is not getting any better.
I think a beginning of the year is always a good time to sort of get some, let's say, uncomfortable pieces of business out of the way without too many people paying too much attention to it. I think the funny thing about the cabinet reshuffle ritual is that it's always meant to signify an increase in efficiency in central government. We're doing a reshuffle, and they do this regularly. But in this case, I think you're right, Mike. I think this is designed to conceal other things, more important things that are going on behind the scenes.
Now, we briefly discussed the cabinet reshuffle on the Sunday Wire last night. If anybody hasn't listened to that yet, get on to 21st Century Wire and have a listen. There was some suggestion that perhaps Boris might be for moving. I think as time has gone on, that seems to be heading back towards Boris staying where he is. But still, no absolute information yet on what's going to happen with him. But there was some speculation he might move to become business secretary and therefore in charge of fracking, for example.
A huge demotion for the Boris bear to go from foreign secretary to any other department. So I think if they move Boris, Mike, it's really sending a signal that he's done a lousy job as foreign secretary, and there's no way around that. It's just going to be a ding on his resume for forever, basically. So in order to save the Boris brand, you have to keep Boris in as foreign secretary, which means more debacles coming in the future. So, and more fun for us.
Yes.
To, well, hopefully he doesn't cause any real trouble, but it's certainly fun commentating on his gaffes.
Absolutely. Right. United Nations has published a new document, the World Economic Situation and Prospects 2018. And it is spectacular, Patrick, because it is all about China. As you read down through this document, every single page almost is discussing China and China's economic impact in the past 18 months. On the world. So this is the World Economic Situation and Prospects 2018. It's a joint effort from the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and 5 UN regional commissions. They are saying that basically, in a nutshell, the Chinese economy has contributed about a third of global GDP growth in 2017. One country, 30%. They have what, a population of 1.5 billion. That's less than 30% of the population of the planet. So they're punching above their weight at the moment. They say that China remains the world's biggest investor in renewables, despite there being less investment over the previous year. A lot of the focus of this economic paper, of course, is the development goals. And so the first section of this looks at renewable energy and the investment in renewable energy, but China way ahead of everybody else. Perhaps that would be strange to some, but anyway, that's the case. China accounted for over 70% of global demand for iron ore, over 40% of the demand for nickel and copper. They are one of the major, in fact, if not the major, demand for oil. Banking flows gaining momentum in line with the pickup in global trade is what they report. And they say, for example, China's 4 largest banks have quadrupled their share of foreign assets on their balance sheets in the last decade. Banks from Brazil, India, and Russian Federation are also expanding international activities. And if you look at that, of course, that's 4 of the 5 BRICS nations. So what we're looking at is this BRICS momentum building and the Belt and Road momentum building. They're saying that manufacturing activity in China also strengthened in 2017, buoyed by an improvement in both domestic and external demand, as well as rising business confidence. But there was one particular graph which from this document which really stood out for me, and it was this one, because this is the one which is mainly describing world poverty. This is population below $1.90 a day poverty line, and the red line that you can see heading from 820 or 830 million down to almost zero is China. And really, I think that's really should say something to all the naysayers over the Belt and Road and what China is doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a pretty impressive statistic there. And one thing that obviously isn't going to be portrayed necessarily on this is the wealth gap. But that's an issue in China, but it's also an issue in the West, in this country, in the United States, and all around the world. The massive increase in sort of consolidation of huge amounts of money in high finance, but China has its own set of problems it's running into. China is launching, we'll cover this maybe next week or possibly 2020, it wants to launch a social credit new scheme, a social credit scheme. So they're harnessing big data right now in order to launch Chinese social credit. And this is going to be assigning a rating system to citizens. This is the theoretical framework of it, based on is how trustworthy you are. How dependable you are. So China's economic gains are amazing, and we have to kind of pay attention to them. Emmanuel Macron is over paying homage to Xi Jinping and presented him with a gift horse, an 8-year-old gelding recruited out of the French cavalry named Vesuvius. And so all the European countries are now paying attention to China, but China also has big social engineering projects as well that it's planning to roll out. And I think that's the beta testing for so many things in the future we're going to see is China.
Just to finish off on this graph, of course, China has done that without meeting any of the Millennium Development Goals, which are all about sustainable development
and poverty reduction.
Poverty, yeah, exactly.
The war on poverty, right?
Exactly.
So they haven't met any of the UN's Millennial Development Sustainable Goals, right?
That's right.
But yet they managed to reduce poverty
Well,
to
according
zero.
to the UN, of course, the Millennium Development Goals are the only way we're going to get people out of poverty, but I don't think that's quite the case.
That's a good point.
Okay, let's move on to Iran, Patrick. And Iran's Revolutionary Guard declares victory over the unrest caused by foreign enemies.
Yes, this is, if you've been following the story, I mean, if you have a chance to check the Sunday Wire, we had Caleb Maupin, who's an RT International correspondent, on the radio show yesterday, and we talked to him for an hour, and we basically unpacked and unraveled the Iran story of the last week. And it's not what we've been seen and told in Western media. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The level of distortion, multi-layers of distortion about what really happened, how it started in Iran, the protests over the last week, what they were signifying, who co-opted them, and so forth. We laid that out in pretty good detail yesterday. But the main point is there are some conflicting factions in Iran, and a lot of it has to do with economic policy, but also social policy as well. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard faction of society, very socially conservative. And then the President Rouhani may be more socially liberal, economically neoliberal, which is absolutely loopy in this day and age. So that's where the problem lies. And this is what started the protest, was people who voted for Rouhani came out on the street and said, this is not why we elected you as president. You're deregulating the banks. We don't want this. We want more state control. And so that's what the protest started out as. You wouldn't get any of that commentary, Mike, if you're looking at anything from the BBC and onwards in the West, especially in America. Oh, my goodness. But so that's an interesting story, and Iran's got its share of challenges ahead, especially up to the next election.
Well, you're not going to get, as you describe in the mainstream media, but you're not going to get that kind of narrative coming from the United Nations or Matthew Rycroft, and particularly Matthew Rycroft. Now, of course, he's in his last few months as permanent representative to the UN Security Council.
A lame duck.
Absolutely, but nonetheless, he's pushing the British line, and he refuses to temper his position any. And he's now got on the Iran bandwagon, and he has said that people should be able to exercise their right to freedom of expression and demonstrate peacefully and lawfully. We encourage the Iranian authorities to permit this. No one is forcing Iran onto our agenda. The Security Council is perfectly empowered through Article 34 of the UN Charter, and I quote, to investigate any dispute or situation which might lead to international friction or give rise to dispute in order to determine whether the continuance of the dispute or situation is likely to endanger the maintenance and international peace and security. The United Kingdom's concerns about the human rights situation in Iran extend beyond the treatment of protesters, the continued use of the death penalty, including for juveniles, weak rule of law, restrictions on freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief are all deeply worrying. This is his position. He went on to say, Iran suffered hugely in the Iran-Iraq war. We worked with Iran after 9/11. The Iranian people represent an ancient and important civilization that has a rightful place in the modern world with a modern economy, but too often Iran's security interests are pursued in a way that destabilizes and at times directly threatens others, supports terrorism, and distorts the Iranian economy. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure who he was talking about there, because I think that probably could have applied to Britain and the United States. This is what they do in the Middle East, don't they? Their security interests are pursued in a way that destabilizes the Middle East. This is what we do. This isn't what Iran's doing.
No, it's not. It's not. So everything that he's doing, that his country is doing, that NATO's doing, that the US is doing, he's projecting that onto Iran.
Absolutely. And he goes on and he says this includes reported transfers of Iranian ballistic missile parts and related technology to the Houthis in Yemen. Such transfers violate our Resolution 2231, which prohibits such transfers without the authorization of the Security Council. They also violate our Resolution 2216, which prohibits the sale or transfer of arms and related materials to the Houthis.
Which resolution, which UN resolution from the Security Council forbids one country from carpet bombing their neighbor under for no reason at all, which is what Saudi Arabia is doing to Yemen, okay? And who is supplying those bombs? Well, it's Britain, it's the United States. So where's the uproar in the great UN Security Council on that front? So I think we could use the word hypocrite.
Well, he's certainly not going to leave his job with any less hypocrisy, is he?
Yeah, I mean, it's Iran supporting terrorism. So let me just get this straight. Matthew Rycroft. So Iran is fighting ISIS in Syria. Iran is fighting ISIS in Iraq. Iran is helping the PMUs, the People's Mobilization Units, to fight ISIS as well, supplying them with arms in Iraq. They beat ISIS now. They've beaten us. So Iran is defeating ISIS in the Middle East. So how is that supporting terrorism? How is that destabilizing the region? Isn't that stabilizing the region to put ISIS down and eradicate them from those countries? Isn't that a good thing?
Yes, right. And he ended up by saying a prosperous, stable Iran is beneficial to us all in the region, or sorry, to all in the region and beyond. We will continue to encourage Iran to comply fully with Security Council resolutions. This is the only way to achieve peace and stability we all endeavor to achieve. So in other words, this is my reading of it. You can correct me if you have a different reading of it. What he's saying is, do as we say or else.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a veiled threat there. So, you know, this canard, it's a canard that Iran is supporting terrorism, okay? Hezbollah is not a terrorist organization. Hezbollah is a resistance organization. They're also part of the Lebanese government as well. They're part of the state structure. So it's not a terrorist organization, despite what Benjamin Netanyahu would like you to believe, or Nikki Haley, or Lindsey Graham, or John McCain. And so Hezbollah has also played a pivotal role in the defeat of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Let's not forget Al-Qaeda in Syria. In terms of numbers, Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda affiliates, Al-Nusra, it outnumbers ISIS. So this is a equal or bigger threat, and they're now clustered in the Idlib province right now.
Well, let's get straight on to that, because Syrian army liberates another 2 towns in Idlib on the way to key airbase. I'm starting to hear stories creeping into the mainstream press, the BBC, about Idlib. They're starting to get a bit concerned about Idlib. Could this be why, Patrick?
Yes, they're concerned because this is the second Islamic State that nobody talks about. So all the Al-Qaeda affiliates, Nusra, Arar al-Sham, Noor al-Din al-Zinki, and many others have now gone and been sent to Idlib. The ones with money have already gone to Turkey, Mike. They already have Turkish passports given to them by Erdogan, and by the grace of Brussels, they'll be allowed to enjoy Schengen movement from Turkey, all those wonderful Al-Qaeda fighters in Idlib who are now Turkish citizens, if Brussels gets their way and helps Turkey towards EU membership. What a lovely future that would be. So here they are. Syrian army is finally making incursions now to retake its province. Let's not forget, this is part of Syria. So they have a right to retake and secure their own territory. But this is where the UK government, the US government, the EU have been pumping development aid money into these terrorist-occupied areas. And Idlib is now the last remaining large terrorist-occupied part of Syria. This is where all our tax money, public money, is going in Europe, UK, US. It's been piling into Idlib on various civil society projects and other sort of aid work, helping to form resilient communities. This is all in their documents.
And of course, we've got to remember why these people are gathered in Idlib. This is because as other areas of Syria were liberated, rather than just killing everybody that was involved in the other side of the fight, people were allowed to leave.
They gave them the option to go, and Idlib was that option, basically.
But Assad kills his own people.
Through the Astana process, which isn't covered in the Western media, they're all talking about Geneva. Nothing's happening in Geneva. It's not relevant anymore. What's important is what's going on, has been going on in the Astana process. So this is the peace and reconciliation process to move and de-escalate thousands of areas around Syria. And then they've left the door open to Idlib, and that was a strategic decision by the Syrian government, by Russia, that thought it was pragmatic just to get them out of the way and return to normalcy in so many different areas like Homs, like Hama, and all around the country in Syria. And then they'll deal with Idlib later. And most of the terrorists, rebels, or terrorists, took the offer, and they were allowed to take their weapons as well. So all this talk about Assad, killing his own people. The problem is these terrorists who are backed by the UK, backed by the US, backed by the EU, essentially, they used people as human shields to hold territory. And they'll probably do the same in Idlib before it's over. So look out for White Helmets videos, lots of them coming now, fast and furious, saying, oh no, here's another rescue, running with some babies in the hand, and so forth. So this is what we can expect now for the next few weeks as the operation to retake Idlib sort of heats up.
Okay, now here we have a Telegraph article from 2010. This is entitled Libya, Saif Gaddafi's London mansion occupied by squatters. And this was one of several articles published in the Telegraph to justify the action in Libya at the time, which ultimately resulted in Gaddafi's rather brutal assassination, murder. Now that was 2010, but if you go looking for it now, well, in fact, it redirects through to the Telegraph news page, and the question is why? Well, apparently they have removed their fake news web articles regarding Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, and they've taken them down because his defense attorney, his defense lawyer, has basically threatened them with a lawsuit that if they didn't take them down, they would be taken to court. So they have taken them down. What I find interesting is that the BBC has not yet taken theirs down.
Oh, there's fake news.
Fake
on
news
the BBC.
on the BBC.
Look at that.
And the Daily Mail.
Oh.
Right. Now, all these news outlets, if that's what they can be described, fake news outlets, all carried the same image of this house, which was allegedly owned by al-Islam, Saif Gaddafi, and we had a couple of people crawling around on the rooftop with a banner with Gaddafi's head on it and a typical red circle with a line through. This was before Gaddafi was dead, of course, and the mainstream media in this country promoting this protest. Never once, Patrick, did they ask who these people were or what they were.
Who are they that brought the banner and hung it there on the house that doesn't belong to the son of Gaddafi?
Well, we don't know is the truth. We don't know. Certainly his lawyer says that it doesn't belong to him, and his lawyer says that the article that the Telegraph wrote was inaccurate, wrong, false. And so the Telegraph seems to agree because they've taken it down.
They've taken it, so it must be true.
So
I mean, the lawyer's accusation must be true. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken it down.
But even, I mean, this article on screen at the moment from the Mail from 2010. As you scroll on down here, you get a picture of Saif Gaddafi, and underneath it says that the house purportedly belongs to him. They aren't so sure enough to say that it does in their own article.
But the narrative works for them.
Absolutely.
The narrative works. So this is mainstream fake news. So in the run-up to any war or humanitarian intervention, the mainstream media will run fake news stories. They will make up fake stories, and they will publish them, and they will put them on the front of tabloids, and they will put them on their newspapers and their websites. They will broadcast them on their news programs. They do it time and time again. That's just another example, Mike, of many. We have a long list of these, by the way. It's quite a long list. Make a nice book someday. Maybe we'll do that. And maybe that's a project for the future.
Yeah,
mainstream fake news, made up, imaginary, fabricated, fictional news by mainstream media. Why aren't they in the dock in the fake news crisis? No, it's the bloggers. It's, independent media. That's the problem. Facebook.
Yes. Right. Israel. Netanyahu backs U.S. threats to gradually close UN Palestinian Refugee Agency.
So this is the sort of financial blackmail, this new style of diplomacy by the U.S., which really, all these threats that we've seen in the UN, they all seem to be...
Is this threat to withdraw U.S. aid unless certain foreign policy objectives are met?
Defund parts of the UN operation. So, but all of these sort of threats, Mike, seem to be all associated with one country, and that has to do with anything with regards to Israel. The U.S. doesn't seem to be interested in any other people around the planet in terms of this relationship with the United Nations. So I think this is a kind of desperate move by Israel. I think this is, we're looking at the death throes of a country diplomatically. I think when they've gotten to this point now, there's nowhere else they can go, Mike, I think, but down. Israel needs to either wake up and sort of smell public opinion globally and start engaging with this issue of apartheid, which they're running in their country, or they're what they think is a country, but it's not really a functioning country if it's got Bantustans stationed all around, and it's a race-based, religious-based society they're trying to construct. It's excluding anybody that is not of a certain religion or race, or not giving them equal rights. These are big, important issues. This is what the UN was designed to tackle and to mitigate and mediate, and the United States is trying to undermine that. So we'll see how far they get with that.
Alex in the chat box saying defund, as in boycott, divest, sanctions. We're not talking about sanctions, we're talking about money withdrawn.
We're talking about whole UN departments being defunded, but we're also talking about money being withdrawn as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, Steve Bannon, what can we say?
So he was the golden boy of the Trump administration, and now you can see very ominous red background here, very auspicious red background that Bannon finds himself against. The subject of this blockbuster book by Michael Wolff, Fire and Fury, that was leaked on WikiLeaks this week. And this is a drama within a drama. And here Bannon has been caught making disparaging marks, using the word treason, and questioning the patriotism of Donald Trump's oldest son, and so Donnie Jr., I think. And this is what Bannon finds himself now ostracized from the same base that made him a mercurial political icon. And now he is being, he's now backtracked on all those statements here in the New York Times. This is fascinating.
But my understanding is it has done him quite a bit of damage, and some talk of even money being withdrawn from Breitbart.
Yeah, well, I think the Mercers are withdrawing. Yeah, there might be the case. Wall Street billionaire Mercer Quant, Cambridge Analytica fame. This is the person that financed Bannon from the beginning and injected a lot of money into Breitbart to make it the media outlet that it is today. So all these characters you see, like Steve Bannon, they didn't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Their rise to power and fame was subsidized because they were willing to promote a certain political agenda, or at least they convinced their donors that they would. And so now Bannon is straying more towards the globalist camp, I think. He seems to be spending a lot of time with Henry Kissinger now, so we'll see. But Steve Bannon, never count this guy out. This is a fiery Irishman that knows how to smell out opportunity and knows how to find money and get his hands on that money. And so he's very, very skilled at this. And he's incredibly flamboyant and entertaining and engaging speaker. So he'll find some benefactors. You might see him in China courting the Chinese, the people that he's been against, talking against for so many months. He'll be in China cashing some big check or something like that.
And what do we know about Wolff?
He's an interesting character, the author of this book, Michael Wolff. He did a brilliant bait and switch where he went on CNN, lambasted CNN last December, and he won the trust of the Trump team by doing that, and he won Bannon's trust. Bannon brought him into the White House, and then Wolf started basically operating, preparing this book that's come out now that some people are accusing of being a work of fiction, and so forth. The Democrats love it. They're really giddy right now at MSNBC and CNN. They're loving this whole drama right now. This thing, oh my God, this is going to help to bring down Trump finally. So Russiagate didn't work. Now it's about Trump's mental fitness. Next week it'll be about something else. It'll be like he's not really as good of a golfer as he said he is. You know, so I don't know how it's going to end up.
I didn't catch who it was, but somebody in the chat box suggesting that he was a Guardian journalist at one point.
Oh, Wolf.
Yeah.
Well, he's worked for quite a few people, yeah. But that wouldn't surprise me. The Guardian, interesting
yes.
organization.
Okay, let's come back to the UK and the news that the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, has been well. It is no longer existing. It no longer exists. I guess it is such a tainted brand, such a toxic brand, that the government has decided that it needs a rebrand. It's now called the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC. This is the reformed police watchdog, previously known as the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It's going to have new leadership under a Director General, which will mean speedier decision making, with a new board to ensure greater accountability to the public. This is what the government says. I'm not sure whether you believe any of that, Pat, but it says this is the latest step in the Home Office reforms to strengthen the organisation and will lead to new powers. We don't know what those will be. It'll have a new single executive head, which is going to ensure clear lines of accountability and a streamlined decision-making process.
Sure.
And it's just going to initiate its own investigations without relying on a force to record and refer a particular case for investigation. It's going to reopen cases that is closed where there are compelling reasons. It's going to increase the IOPC's independence from the police by abolishing managed and supervised investigations. It's going to investigate all disciplinary investigations against chief officers, and it's going to prevent cases against officers in the police disciplinary process. It's going to present, not prevent, present cases against officers in the police disciplinary process when the force disagrees with IOPC's findings. So we wait to see with interest.
Look at this picture. Are they going to a rollerball match?
That is
going on here?
That is actually an image of Greater Manchester Police from on their way to a riot, apparently.
I thought it was rollerball with Paul Newman.
Yes,
okay.
It does look a bit like that, doesn't
Yeah.
it? This was like an interim costume that they were wearing at one stage.
I like the shoulder pads.
Yes.
The double shoulder pads. I think that's a good touch.
It's not fully black, as you can see. There's still some
There's a
blue
bit of
in
blue
there.
there, so it's friendly.
I think these days it's now fully black.
And where are they going? To a student protest or something like that?
Well, I don't know, but of course, in more recent months, they've been going to anti-fracking protests.
Yeah.
Yes, nice guys.
Interesting.
And the city's agenda moves ahead, and of course, who is pushing it as hard as they can, but the Guardian, because the Guardian has their public leaders network. This is part of the public leaders network. People think that the Guardian is merely a news outlet. This is not the case. They have a bunch of sort of networks, common purpose style networks. They provide a platform for these networks to communicate. And the Public Leaders Network is one of these. This is UK Metro Mayors, as a headline, still don't have the financial muscle that they need. And this is pushing forward with the city-state agenda in the UK. They want it, they're quite keen to see that moving forward. The article says that Metro Mayors have already made an impact in the UK. Mayors like Andy Burnham and Andy Street are seriously constrained by Whitehall, is the unfortunate situation, and they need more money, more resources, because apparently in order to deal with homelessness in Manchester, Andy Burnham had to donate a chunk of his salary, his salary from the job, in order to deal with homelessness in Manchester. It's a hard life for some of these people.
Wow, I bet that's just bizarre. Did everybody have to donate a chunk of their salary, or did he just do that? Was that just to buy sandwiches for a couple of people, or? No,
this was him, a cynical attempt to present himself as being something that he isn't, I think.
Well, I think it's a noble gesture. if everybody does it.
If it
right?
was anybody but Andy Burnham, perhaps
Right.
you might say that.
So the city-state agenda, building resilient cities, building smart cities,
Absolutely.
building safe cities. So that was great. So all part of the city-state agenda.
Absolutely. They say in 2018, the Metro mayors will need to continue to use their collective influence to keep the pressure up on government to go faster and further with devolution. But it's because this is all.
So give us more money so that we can make you irrelevant, is basically what they're saying, right?
Well, we've got to understand what this is about. This is being presented as bringing democracy. This is the big society. It's being presented as bringing democracy to the street level, right across the country. Everybody gets to participate, and of course that's not the case. What it's actually doing is bringing centralized control right to the street level. So devolution is not what it seems.
No, it's devolution to a cosmopolitan, urban-based electorate is what it is.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
Absolutely. We'll end on this one. KPMG, the finance insurance company, auditing company, is off the Grenfell Tower inquiry. Now, this has been something which people have been asking for quite some time. Here's an open letter from activists and others. A couple of MPs signed this as well. Cancel KPMG appointment to the Grenfell Tower inquiry as advisors to the Grenfell Tower inquiry. And basically, this was because KPMG was employed by the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea to audit their accounts. It was also employed by Ryden Construction, which refurbished the tower in 2015 to audit their accounts. And it was also employed by Celotex, which was manufacturing the insulation that was used in the cladding, or between the cladding and the wall. So how could there not be a conflict of interest there? Where was the independence and the that was only going to be a conflict of interest. So this open letter was written, the KPMG and the inquiry have now been embarrassed sufficiently that they've mutually decided that KPMG should leave. So it was a joint decision, therefore they were equally embarrassed by it.
Pretty shocking that wasn't troubleshooted ahead of time, Mike.
Well,
I mean, it's pretty obvious if they're clients of all of those people.
Yes.
And then they put them on as the sort of auditor for this amazing. Amazing.
So what is this inquiry? That is the question, isn't it? Okay, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, Patrick, for joining me today. Thank you very much for joining me. We will be back. Brian will be back with me tomorrow at 1 p.m. We will see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.